everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Seeker Daily. I am Trace, and we are here on our last day of the Democratic National Convention doing some live coverage. And throughout the week, there's been a lot of talk of women leaders. I mean, I think we all know why that's the case. And joining me today are three women who are active in politics. Hi, guys. How y'all feeling?
Hi.
Great? Really good?
Yeah.
So we've got Abby Lee Cook. She's a Hillary supporter. We've got Bridget Todd. She is a political editor at Medium. And we've got Pamela Kirkland, who is a producer and reporter for PBS NewsHour in politics. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we were talking just before we started. I am on this group, but it's really a conversation of, right? So I just wanted to first kind of assess, how do you guys feel women have been represented here at the Democratic National Convention?
Well, I came straight from Cleveland, so we were at the RNC last week for coverage, and just looking at the contrast, the number of women who've been on stage at the DNC versus the RNC, we've seen a lot more women. We've heard a lot from women, and a lot more about issues like pay equity. We're going to hear tonight about universal pre-K and issues that are typically, I don't like billing them as women's issues, but they do, some people categorize them that way. I think we've heard more of that this week than we have in the last week, but excited to hear from Hillary tonight for sure and see what she has to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I was also at the RNC last week, which was a little bit different. I keep thinking about this great speech at the RNC by Ivana and how she, talked about what it's like to be a working woman, a working mom, but then you really didn't hear that much about policies that would actually help working women and working mothers. And so I'm really happy that those issues really got, center stage and center billing here at the DNC in a more kind of substantial way. And so I'm really excited for Hillary tonight. I think we've seen a lot of different kinds of women being, put on the main stage, Black women, Latina women. Today there'll be the first openly trans woman speaking at the DNC, which is so exciting.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I think that I share similar sentiments. I didn't get the opportunity to go to the RNC, but being here has been definitely a lot more policy heavy. I think that women as a whole, as sort of not necessarily just an interest group, but as a diverse, multicultural, multifaceted group of people who are interested and need lots of different things, have been represented both in policy and in voting blocks and everything else. And if you look out in the crowd, you see that all of these delegates coming from all over the United States are different colors, different faces, different genders, transgenders, sexual orientation. So it's been great to see that represented in such a sort of stark contrast, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I like that you right off the bat brought up that you don't like to call them women's issues. And I think it's funny because moving forward, do you feel like that's going to kind of fall away, and healthcare issues that maybe used to be considered women's issues and childcare issues that used to be considered women's issues will now just be considered, hey, issues.
Yeah, I almost feel like that label has to fall away just based on where we are at this time. There are so many, single women are going to make up a huge number of voters and could determine this election. And the place where we are right now, women are independent. You don't have to have a man co-sign a credit card for you to get one. Thank God. We're in such a different place now. There are stay-at-home dads. There are, the fluidity between the genders now. There's no reason to separate them as men's issues and women's issues because they are everyone's issues. The economy is an issue for men and it's an issue for women. So I feel like one day that label has to fall away because it's just, it doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
We don't call anything men's issues, right?
Yeah, I was trying to think of one just now.
Right.
Shock itch.
Hopefully not. Although it has been hot here. Really hot. I was thinking, something like paternity leave might be a men's issue, but not really, because it's an everybody issue. It's a family issue.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
I think the idea is that, these are American issues. These are the issues that matter the most to the widespread electorate of the American people. And that's what matters. And that means women, men, children, families, the broad spectrum of humanity.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree. And I think, on the issue of these kind of issues being framed as women's issues, everyone is better off when, the economy is good. Everyone's
Right.
better off when like women and all people have reproductive freedom. And so
Right.
honestly, thinking of them as like women's issues isn't actually accurate when we can, safely see that everybody benefits when these things are addressed.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and in 2012, women made up more than half of the vote. And in 2016, we've got the first female candidate who's being nominated by a major party. So it seems like the women vote will affect this campaign even more than it affected the last campaign.
Absolutely.
And does it feel that way? Do women feel more front and center in this campaign? I mean, aside from the head of the party at this point?
I'd say yes and no in many ways. I think that as a rule, right now, young women are starting to feel so much more comfortable stepping into the electoral political sphere. And I think that because of that impetus, you're seeing a lot more of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't there before. It's just it's a comfortability level, and it's all about having those mentors to look up to. It's about being able to look up on that stage tonight and know that one day, like, I could see myself up there, I could see someone like Bridget up there, I could see anyone up there. I can see, maybe one day we'll have a transgender president, we'll have someone like that. So I think it's about having people to look up to.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think, in my mind, I think that women have been at the forefront of every political movement in the United States, right? Labor, racial justice, criminal justice reform, reproductive freedom. Women have always been there. We've always had this loud voice. And it's always been, in my mind, us who have really been these agents of change to like move things forward. Mm-hmm. I think now we're seeing this sort of more kind of respected and sort of in a more visible way. And so women, we've been here since, doing this work since forever. We haven't always it's been a little thankless, and we haven't always gotten our props. Right. But I think people are starting to step back and see, women, their vote matters, their voice matters, their political clout matters, and sort of having us at the forefront of these movements in very visible ways.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, it does seem that throughout history, women have been marginalized in the role of spokesperson,
right?
But they haven't been invisible. They've just been not the spokesperson, the person that you remember in the history books. Even that is starting to change. I work mainly on a science show as well for Discovery and for Seeker, and we talk a lot about like women in science and how they've always been there. It's just they don't always get the picture on the history book, and that's changing.
Even in the case of Hillary Clinton, it's very interesting because, and it's always funny to me to hear when people hear her the early years, mm-hmm. because a lot of people don't really know Hillary Clinton's full history. Especially younger voters don't know how long she's been in the political process. So when you look at a relationship like she has with Bill Clinton, for a long time it was about propping him up and him running for governor, running for president, and her being first lady and still working on major policies like healthcare reform and CHIP and all of these other things that she did while she was in the White House, but the focus was always on Bill. And it wasn't until, she says the story goes, someone told her, dare to win, dare to compete. Mm-hmm. Dare to compete, Mrs. Clinton. And so she ran for Senate in New York and she won by a lot. And I just think it's really interesting looking at her life and where she started, what things were like in the 60s and that environment, and now where we are now in 2016. She kind of encompasses a lot of those movements in a way.
Definitely.
She's definitely spanned them all, and she's been around to see them all, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible the amount of history that someone like Hillary Clinton has witnessed. It's amazing. And the amount of it that has her fingerprints on it.
Yeah.
Like, we talk about affordable health care, we talk about better education standards, we talk about all this stuff. You can see her little fingerprints all over this stuff. And that, to me, is the most enchanting thing about her.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I was reading up to research for this, and there was a talk about, with Barack Obama, there was a sense of urgency, an interest in electing someone who would be the first African-American president. Do you feel that sense of urgency for electing the first female president in the same way? Because I feel like, from my perspective, I haven't seen it in the same capacity. There's a lot more talk of a fragmented women's vote. And yes, more women do support Barack Obama when he was running in 2008 and 2012. But we've talked a little bit about how younger women don't support Hillary in the same way that older women do. And is there that sense of urgency? Do you feel that?
It's an interesting split, and you touched on the generational divide that you see, where in some instances, younger women were more enthusiastic about Bernie Sanders. We spent a lot of time in Iowa during the primary and talked to students at Drake University, and a lot of them told me that, they have nothing against Hillary Clinton, but Bernie really spoke to the issues that they were concerned with. They, brought up the untrustworthy issue that she's had to deal with through this entire campaign and is going to have to deal with in the general as well. So for them, electing a woman was important, but it wasn't the number one issue for them. It wasn't the reason that they were going to vote. They wanted to make sure that they lined up on economic policies, that they lined up when it came to foreign policy. Those were the issues that were more important to them than simply just gender.
I think we're seeing a trend line that's going much more towards holistic politics, right? This idea that you really are seeing a generation that's a little bit more politically engaged than one would have expected from them. And I think that we can actually owe a lot of thanks to the Obama campaign for that. And at a certain point, there's mentality started changing towards intersectionality and a more holistic view of feminism, too, that is like, I'm going to vote for who I believe is the best candidate because I have the right to vote and make decisions based on that. And I think that we're going to start seeing more and more historic victories in both of those areas.
Yeah, and I would also, I agree with all of that, but I also would sort of throw in sort of race as another kind of like fragmenting factor. I know that a lot of black women are one of the most loyal Democratic voting blocs in history. And I think that because of that, it's very easy for Democratic candidates, particularly Hillary Clinton, to sort of take for granted that black women will support, a Clinton presidency and sort of perhaps not feel the need to court our vote as aggressively as, you might court other votes. And so I think that for a lot of younger black feminists, there is a question of sort of, is this a candidate who I need to sort of throw my weight around or behind? And I think that's one of the reasons that I think that the vote is so fractured, that a lot of women are sort of looking skeptically at her, her candidacy. I also think it's just important to sort of recognize what you were saying, this idea that, folks are thinking about these issues in a much more holistic way, that if you're a feminist, perhaps it isn't I personally believe that it is, but perhaps it isn't the woman candidate who's going to be your best, your best fit.
And isn't that what feminism means?
Exactly.
That we all get to choose for ourselves and it plays into democracy in a beautiful way. So I think for me, like you said, I think she is the best candidate and she's definitely the best equipped to handle the job. But at the end of the day, I think millennials as a whole aren't seeing gender quite as much as we've seen in past generations.
Yeah, that's what it seems like to me as well. It seems like I liked that phrase, the sense of urgency, because when it felt like with Barack Obama, it's like, we have an African-American candidate. He's
Absolutely.
Amazing. Let's vote for him, right? That's what, that's what the kind of the feel of that election was.
And I think speaking with some older women here at the convention this week, you felt that sense of urgency.
Definitely. Yeah.
We talked to Roz Wyman, who's one of the first women to chair a convention ever. She chaired the 1984 Democratic Convention. And, she said on her headstone, she wants it to read, "I was a good mother and I helped elect Hillary in 2016. This is so important to her and women like her. Eleanor Smeal was also on the floor, a big part of the feminist movement. And, they feel like we are way overdue in terms of having a woman president. And the fact that it's 2016 and we're still having this conversation about electing a woman and, they feel that urgency. They feel like the time is now and women have a responsibility almost to elect Hillary, or you should feel like you have a responsibility to elect her.
And it is, like she said in '08, the highest, hardest glass ceiling. It's the last big milestone for American women, I think, in terms of having those leadership role models to look up to. Women are in boardrooms, they're, presidents of universities, they're CEOs, they're managing families and businesses, and they're entrepreneurs, and they're all over the place. But the one thing we haven't been able to tackle is the presidency. And I think it means a lot to my generation, but I think it means even more to the women who are the old stalwarts. They've been waiting and working tirelessly for this for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. And I mean, think about like young children who have only known, Barack Obama as president,
Right.
and then if they only knew Hillary Clinton as president. So in their mind, people of color can be president. In their mind, women can be presidents,
Right.
right? Like that wasn't the case when we were growing up.
Right.
I mean,
Not at
I
all.
still remember a teacher when I was a child saying, I think I said like, oh, I want to be president when I grow up. And she was like, black people can't be president. And
Whoa.
we showed her,
My
right?
goodness.
And I think like for the kids, that will always be the case. And I think that's so
Absolutely.
beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The importance of role models is paramount. You have to have people who look like you, talk like you, and act like you in leadership positions. And it's vital for young girls who are in school to be able to look up and say, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Would you say Hillary Clinton is a role model for young people? Like, and if so, like, what is something that really speaks to young people about her? Since, again, just to reiterate, it does seem that older voters are more apt to support her.
Right. For me, I just admire her tenacity. I admire the fact that when you think about someone who has no quit, Hillary Clinton has no quit. Mm-hmm. She's the type of person and she's in it for the right reasons, right? She's the type of person who's the first one in the office and the last one to leave, and she's doing it because it matters and it means something to her. And what we do matters at the end of the day. And I think, to me, it's, like I said before, it's enchanting. The fact that I can look up and say, okay, like if Hillary Clinton can get through, 2008, I can get through today, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I liked what President Obama said in his speech, that she did everything I did backwards and in heels.
Yeah.
And that was very intimidating in a lot of ways for him.
Yeah.
And I think him coming out and saying that now 8 years later, it's nice kind of lip service to 2008 and how rough an election that really was
Yeah.
for both of them.
Yeah.
They both
Definitely.
came out a little bruised out of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And seeing them together on stage last night, I was taking pictures, and there were so many moments where you looked at them and you could tell they really do have a genuine appreciation for each other, and they really do admire each other. And the Ginger Rogers line was great that he had last night. And
Yeah.
also another big applause line is when he said, no one is more qualified to be president than Hillary Clinton. Not me, not Bill.
Yeah.
Everybody laughed.
Yeah.
It's a good line.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was quite a roar when she walked out. I mean, it was a pretty electric scene to be part of, for sure.
Yeah.
What about kind of to bring it back to like we are at the DNC, at the RNC? Do you guys feel like women were as represented? I mean, Miliana came out and Ivanka came out, and there was a lot of talk by women talking about Donald Trump, and just how did it feel to you looking back at that now, having seen this? I mean, we talked a little bit about how we feel here, but I mean, in terms of looking at the RNC, do you think that women were powerful in the same way that it seems like you're describing here?
I mean, looking at the rosters when you line them up, but at the RNC, you did see, Ivanka on stage that you mentioned earlier, and that speech that did focus a lot actually on women. And the Trump campaign recognizes that if they are going to compete in November, they have to do more to get women engaged and to get women on their side. So they did spend a fair amount of time bringing out, the general manager of Trump Winery in Virginia, who's a woman. These women who have worked for Donald Trump and can kind of speak to his character and who he is as a person. So you could tell at the RNC that they recognized this is an issue for us. This is something we're going to have to deal with. And I do think that they took the time to try and find some unique voices that you haven't heard from. And there were some of the regulars. You saw Senator Joni Ernst on stage, senator from Iowa, who's a big Trump supporter, speaking on his behalf as a surrogate. You also had Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia on stage. So they tried to bring out some big names, big heavy hitters, women in Congress right now who support him as the nominee. But I think they've got a lot of work to do if they really do want to try and get women to support Trump in the general election.
Yeah, I mean, I think comparing the RNC to the DNC, I do think that they, really tried to showcase different kinds of women who are in different kinds of roles, which I appreciated. And I thought that the speech that his daughter gave was really, really great. But yeah, I think that I hate the idea that I think it's a common idea that folks have that like, oh, Democrats are the party of women and like Republicans don't care about women and like they don't have any women. There are so many smart, capable, amazing women on the right. And like, I'm happy to see these women get more of a spotlight because like you said earlier, when you have representation, whether it's on the right or the left or anywhere in between, that's good for everybody. And so I applaud them for I think they were making an effort to sort of highlight these women and these voices. I would say that should be more reflected in their policy positions. They are, they care so much about women, which they say they do. But yeah, it's good to see this diversity of voices, including gender on the stage.
Yeah.
I agree. I think you definitely have sort of the stark contrast in terms of hard policy supporting women and supporting women in the sense that they are promoting women to leadership roles. You're seeing a lot more involvement in red states, with especially on the local level. But I think, like she said, got a long way to go before I think they are really going to be able to compete on a national scale.
Yeah. It's funny because you all use the word like they tried to do this, they put an effort into this. Is that a word that you use when we're saying they tried? It implies that they may not have succeeded in that. They were trying to do it. Whether they succeeded or not, I guess, is a different discussion. But do you think that was the feeling at the end of the RNC, or is it a feeling in comparison to the DNC? I guess is maybe a tough question to ask on the fly, but.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll know if it worked or not until November.
Yeah.
Yeah. And right now, Trump has, according to Gallup, a 70% disapproval rating among women. So he's got a long hill to climb.
Definitely, and I think just to sort of look at my point earlier, I think that women need better representation in all levels of politics. And I'm even though I think here at the DNC it's been great, I don't want to spend too much time backpatting because I think more women across the board is better. And women of color, disabled women, marginalized voices, all of that needs to improve on both sides. And so while we're here saying it was this way at the DNC and this way at the RNC, I just want to step back and say it needs to be better. More women, more diversity in all levels. Yeah,
these are just the conventions. They're not actual Congress. They're not actual, departments in government. They're not local government. This is just conventions where we talk about the politics itself.
It's great to see so many black women on stage here, but get us in the Senate, right?
Yeah.
Get us in Congress.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that goes back to the idea that we need those leaders so that other women feel like I can step up and run. And that's why it's so vital for there to be a diversity of colors, races, voices, everything in both houses of Congress, the military, presidency, all of it. I mean, it's absolutely vital that people have others to look up to and say that, yeah, okay, I'll run for elected office. You know, it's a huge decision to make. And it's, what is the statistic that it takes women 4 times as many times as men to be asked to run to actually agree, So it's definitely, it needs to change. And I think that, both parties are actively trying to push for that. But I think that currently we're seeing a better job on the Democrat side. But
yeah, and I guess to round out the conversation, there's a lot of talk about feminism and how that's part of this conversation as well, how women have moved forward in the vote in part because they organized and, feminists got together and said, hey, let's make sure that equality is an important part of all of these platforms, regardless of your political policy implication there. But do you think that it's because of celebrity and media? Do you think it's grassroots? What exactly is there? There's a lot of companies investing more in their female voices. We've got Broadly on Vice, we've got Lena Dunham's Lenny Letter, we've got MTV's Brawless. I mean, we've got all of these shows that are women's voices, many of them openly feminist voices, which are out there. And is that helping push the envelope? Is that are those role models also, but outside of politics?
I think it's certainly helping. I think that it takes a village, and I think it starts in the classroom. It always starts in the classroom. I can remember being told, yes, you can do that, or no, you can't do that in the classroom, and that changes your entire trajectory. But I think having those resources available, being able to go to someone like an Emily's List or an Annie's List or a Carol's List or things like that and be able to say, hey, I'm thinking about running for elected office, and access the tools and help that you need to do something like that. And the same goes for any profession. Being able to see women surgeons, being able to see things like that. I think that we're building a narrative, and it's becoming much more accessible and tangible for women to look and see feminism as something that isn't, it's not foreign to them anymore. It's something that is innate and inborn in each of us.
Yeah, and I like so much what you said about this idea that it's not just about politics, it's about sort of our sort of like cultural everything, like, you know, art, culture, movies, all of that. I think that for a long time, women were not, particularly young women, were not seen as sort of a driving force of anything, not politics. Like our vote was not respected, our artistic tastes were not respected. And I think people are starting to take women more seriously. And so I think when you see things like, you know, Lenny Letter, broadly, the establishment, all these women saying, we don't need to sort of, you know, necessarily break down the door and be like, please include us. We can start our own media company, right? Like, right. I don't need, you know, whatever mainstream media to like tell my story. We can tell our own stories, and we can be very successful at it economically. People will love it. And I think, you know, I just think that for a very long time, people did not respect women, our choices, our outlooks, our views, and they did not feel like our stories needed to be told in an authentic way by ourselves. And so I think that we're really seeing, you know, folks kind of push back against that and say, no, women, our choices matter, our voices matter, our stories matter, and we're going to tell them, we're going to be respected, and we're going to, you know, kick ass.
I like it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. I think it seems like the discussion has kind of said essentially that the women's vote is not one thing, but it's pretty damn important, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, and being able to win over women isn't necessarily the goal. It's just to kind of make sure that you're remembering that they're part of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember the ladies.
Guys, thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. Make sure to check out our video tomorrow morning. It looks at the power of the First Lady, and not just the office of the First Lady, but how First Ladies throughout the history of the United States have changed what being a First Lady means, and also what might happen if Hillary Clinton became president, what the office of the First Gentleman might look like, which is kind of cool. So make sure you check that out. Subscribe so you get more Seeker Daily. This is our last live stream from the DNC. Check out our live streams from the RNC. Shout out to my guy Jules for doing all of that work, and then I tagged in for the DNC. So make sure you tune in, keep watching Seeker Daily, and we'll see you next time.